Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the Professor, Greg Dooley, and the pundit, Steve Clarke. Men, take the mic.
That's right, it's another episode of The Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clarke, and we are presented once again by Nick Hopwood, who's a certified financial planner, founder and president of Peak Wealth Management. Retire with confidence. Greg, it is Michigan football game week. East Carolina, the first game of the season. We're going to assume it's the first win of the season. How are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling great, and I'm feeling great about our listeners, by the way, Steve. A big thank you for all the listeners. Many of you have stuck with us. You've shared it with your friends. Thank you, and we've made it, Steve. We've made it to game week. Here we are, and I'm excited. I'm excited to get in the stadium is what I'm excited to get in and just feel that vibe again. I'm not one of the people who are just dying for the season to start, like through August or July. But now that it's here, I'm pumped to get in there for Saturday. And yeah, it's East Carolina. Okay. I'm all right with it. New game. I'm all right with it. I'm excited. Oh, I want to hear about all the people our age, Steve, who are asking, which channel is Peacock?
Yes, and how can I record on Peacock?
Alexa, what is Peacock?
Peafowl is a common name for three bird species in the genera Pavo and Afropavo within the tribe Pavonini of the family Phaeacionidae.
Will be a common refrain in the northern parts of Michigan where maybe people aren't quite as tuned in as we are to what's going on. It will be something, and there will be some outrage. And then they'll go to the local Eagles Club or the local up north bar, Pine Tables, Pine Bar, and the bartender will look at them with amazement when they ask him to put on Peacock.
That's sort of like the 1980s. That's how it went. Can't get it on my TV at home. Let's go to a bar and watch the game.
We will not have that problem, though, Steve. No, I believe both of us will be there.
We're Comcast users. I don't know if Peacock's free anymore. Haven't been on Peacock in forever, but I just would speak it in my voice remote on Xfinity, and it would automatically come up. But at some point, I think we have to pay for it. Maybe they've saved that for now. I think the big question is that people are going to be really upset about is, how do I record a game on Peacock?
Yeah.
Because you're an Xfinity person, you can't record it.
And Michigan's got this wonderful fan base. I mean, I'm not putting ourselves in that category, but there's a lot of citizen journalists out there, and a lot of them use the game film to break it down. There's a former player from the 80s on Twitter who goes play by play and kind of breaks down what's happening. I saw him complaining on Twitter, wait a minute, I got a problem here. How do I record this? Now, there are ways to get around that and figure out how to record it, but it'll take some work for people. Steve, we have a busy week, though. We have stuff to do. You have your midweek peak on Wednesday, but then we are going to be in studio as part of Fantastic Friday. And you've been a part of that for a little while.
Not every single year, but most years I've had a 2-hour block because they've had a morning show and an afternoon show. Mike Spath used to have Inside the Huddle from 10 to noon. He'll still be doing that for that particular day. But they've always used to ask me, hey, can you fill in that gap somewhere between 10 and 3 to do 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever time you could do? And that's exactly what we did. Now you get to be a part of it.
For people who don't know what we're talking about, of course, WTKA, the local sports radio station, powerhouse. And what they've done for many, many years is really take over the entire schedule on Friday before the first game. And dubbed it Fantastic Friday. They bring on a lot of high-profile guests. A couple years ago, Steve and I interviewed the Sklar brothers, the pretty famous comedy duo team and Michigan guys. Actually, we were in school when I was there. And, we did Jim Brandstetter and stuff like that. So This episode comes out Wednesday. That will be on the Friday of game week, right before the game, from 12 to 2. And I assume it'll stream on iHeart and wherever you can listen if you're not from in town. And we may share that episode here on this podcast channel as well if we can do that. So we'll see, but I'm pumped about it.
That would be great. And of course, that would be the day before Michigan takes on East Carolina in the first game of the season. And Michigan is ranked number 2 in the preseason, which I believe is the first time that has happened since 1991. So that was a long time ago. Some of the people listening to the show probably are not that old. So that's, 31, 32 years ago. 1991 was a great season. First and foremost, Desmond Howard wins Michigan's second Heisman Trophy, but it was a good year for Michigan, and they were great on offense and defense. You have any takeaways from some of those games? Because I know I do.
Yeah, well, I was a student and at Michigan during that time. And the one thing, when you say 91, I go right to Desmond Howard. That is my memory. There's a lot of stuff because that was when the offense was transforming into a more modern scheme under Gary Moeller. But the memories are all about all the plays Desmond had. And what I tell people about that experience of being in the student section and following that team was there was just this incredible feeling about the guy. A unique feeling, I think, for a receiver because, and I describe it this way, everybody knew where the ball was going. Everyone knew who it was going to in certain passing situations, and there was nothing the defense could do about it. Nothing the defense could do about it. And the scoring almost seemed automatic. And I think he averaged around 2 touchdowns a game.
Right.
And again, for that era where teams started to score more points, this wasn't like, you grudged out a 7-0 victory.
No.
Nobody could stop the guy, and it was fantastic.
Desmond Howard started off, the first game is in Boston College, and Michigan's trailing 10-0, and Desmond scores how many times, Greg?
4 times.
4 times.
Yeah.
One on a kickoff return and 3 touchdowns. It's like, hey, that was a nice start for the young guy who came through. And then week number 2 was Notre Dame. And it was big because Michigan hadn't beaten Notre Dame since 1986. Notre Dame was a top 5 team. Michigan was a top 5 team. We lost all 4 of those games between 1987 and 1990. The Notre Dame game was known for Desmond Howard because, of course, the catch on a pass play.
He's going to throw
on a 4th down.
Back to fire for it. They went for it all. A diving pass for a touchdown. Holy cow. Would you believe this?
People growing up watching with Bo Schembechler just would have died at the possibility, the thought of actually passing the ball on a 4th and 1 deep into the end zone.
That was a great call by Coach Moeller. Every time I called that, it was incomplete.
It was a diving catch by Desmond, cover of Sports Illustrated, laid flat out. I mean, just keep going.
Yeah. It's obviously very special to me. So I was there right in the student section and witnessed that whole scene. It's one of the most remarkable plays I've ever seen. So years later, the athletic department released the headset audio of Gary Moeller and talking to Jerry Hanlon, and you could hear the players talking and Elvis Gerbach talking. And it sets the whole stage for the entire, before the play, the call, the read, during the play you can hear, and then the aftermath of Gary Moeller just saying something to the effect of, boy, that kid is something else, Desmond Howard.
If you got a simple completion, throw it. Desmond, you got to look it in. Okay, give him the hitch. If you don't, run 29. You want to Caesar?
Yeah, we'll go Caesar.
Hey, it was 29 and Caesar. Get out of the way.
Yeah, no matter what. Red tie, 29, Caesar or Joe?
Caesar is up. Hey, Ricky! He's going to throw it to Desmond, and Desmond's going to score a touchdown. Jerry, should I be kicking a field goal?
That's one of my favorite, off the field, well, I guess on the field, but off the traditional coverage of the game. And I posted that in Invictors. Now, to follow that up, Ira from WTKA had me in and interview Gary Moeller for about an hour, and we spent a lot of time breaking down the tape, and he explained what the calls and the reads meant. And it's something it was just a special time, especially now that Gary Moeller's passed away. It was a really unique experience for me. One of the coolest things I've been able to do is having this loose affiliation with Michigan football. It's been really cool.
And that offense was fantastic. Elvis Gerbach, the quarterback, I don't think Michigan has thrown fade passes into the corner of the end zone since. When you talked about the defense knew what was going to happen, if Michigan was inside the 10-yard line, and Desmond had 2 routes, the slant or the fade. And the cornerback had to guess because Elvis Gerbach could drop that like a rainbow right into the corner every time. Desmond was going to catch it. But then the slant play is the slant play.
Yeah.
So that was an automatic. But they also had a superb ground game under a great offensive line that could pass protect and also run block. Steve Everett broke his jaw in the 1991 Notre Dame game. But the running game had Ricky Powers, had Jesse Johnson, had Tyrone Wheatley, a young Tyrone Wheatley in 1991. I mean, that offense was absolutely stacked.
No, it was great. And you mentioned Ricky Powers. And speaking of that play, one of the options of the play was to pitch it to Powers if they didn't like how the defense was set up on that Desmond Howard play. But they had amazing athletes. And again, Bo Schembechler is remembered and fondly and was just had an incredible winning record. But there were people pining for a more modern offense. And I felt like that was like the time you got to see it. You got to see the full power of all this talent and all these athletes, what it could do. And that was just an example. But no, you're spot on. And by the way, Lou Holtz spoke to John Crick as a supplement to his great book on the Michigan-Notre Dame rivalry, Natural Enemies. And Holtz said they had the right defense in. They had the right defense for a pass play. And Michigan just made and Desmond just made an incredible play.
Well, I mean,
obviously the guy's on him, right?
Yeah, 6 inches further by Gerback and it's incomplete.
Right.
And if it's 6 inches behind, then it could have been deflected. It's just hard to say, but I mean, it was a magical moment in Michigan history.
It was.
And the defense had players on it. Eric Anderson and Steve Morrison were the two, stalwart linebackers on that team. I think Lance Doughton was a safety or a cornerback on that team. Corwin Brown was on that defense. And the defense kind of struggled. In fact, Lloyd Carr really got some heat about the number of points that they were giving up. And people were wondering if he should remain at defensive coordinator. Well, when the season finished up, let's just do November. Okay. Shutout against Purdue. Gave up 14 to Northwestern. Shut out Illinois. Gave up only 3 to Ohio State. I mean, by then Michigan was outscoring their opponents like 170 to 13 or something like that. And questions about the defense, I think, certainly went out the window on that. They did lose 2 high-profile games. They lost to Florida State at home. Florida State was number 1. Michigan was number 3 in the nation. And I had never seen a first half like that in Michigan Stadium before. They were just trading haymakers in the first half. The second half, Florida State continued to score while Michigan didn't. And then, of course, in the last game, Washington was the number 2 team in the nation. So Michigan's 2 losses came to the number 1 and number 2 teams in the nation. Michigan lost out in the Rose Bowl, which was kind of a common occurrence in that time period. But the year afterwards, Michigan beat Washington in a thriller the year following that. So 1991 was a magical season. It was a Heisman Trophy winning season for Desmond Howard. It's one of those fond years you think about. But if you're too young to remember that, just remember that 1991 was one of their better years.
Absolutely. And, the Heisman Trophy remains probably the most prestigious individual award in a sport, even to this day. And it just means so much. And by the way, Desmond, it wasn't close. He won in a landslide, and again, as a receiver, he's an offensive skill player, but receivers really don't win the They were
ready. They were ready to give him the Heisman Trophy after the Notre Dame game. I mean, that's just 2 games. That was just 2 games, but then throughout the course of the season, it was just sort of like we briefly talked about. He basically averaged 2 touchdowns per game, and one of those touchdowns was on the fade, and one of those touchdowns was on the slant. And they weren't trying to be greedy with him. I think they could have gotten easily 4 touchdowns with him against some Big Ten competition if they wanted to. But they were distributing the ball. They weren't making it a one-person show. That running game was absolutely fantastic as well. And so the offense basically did what they wanted to. Again, they beat Ohio State 31-3. And if you think about it, the way that they were beating teams on that schedule, it's kind of very Ohio State-like over their last 10 years. If you're just growing up knowing that this is what Ohio State's about, Michigan was on that level back in the late 80s, early 90s, where they had won 5 straight Big Ten championships.
Yeah, we didn't even mention, speaking of Desmond, you mentioned the Ohio State game. We didn't even mention the Hello Heisman moment, which, again, was one of the most phenomenal plays I've ever seen. And any, say, college football hype package, hey, the season's here, and I just saw one yesterday. They show him striking the pose. And
Hello, Heisman.
So, how many people have struck the pose on the field since then?
Great question.
We don't have an answer to that. I don't think anybody's keeping track of it.
Every Heisman candidate.
I mean, it's like asking how many teams went to baggy shorts after the Fab Five started. It's just about everybody.
Yeah, can we play that on DraftKings? Like, is there going to be a Heisman strike pose? So we'll see. No, it's good. But I'm curious, Steve. Like, do you have a routine? So you are part of the countdown to kickoff, which we haven't talked about a lot on this, right? You talked about kind of how you got involved and how you meshed with Sam and those guys, I think, on an earlier podcast. But As far as the game, so this will be the first edition of the content kickoff. It's in a place called Joe's Garage, which is a parking structure right across from the stadium. It's one of the best pregame environments that I've been to, and there are many around Michigan Stadium. But it is awesome, and basically you guys do the pregame show live in front of a pretty big crowd right across from the stadium. You got to be excited for it.
I am, and I am excited for every year. The show was basically a concept of college football's game day on ESPN, but we were doing it for local radio, and we invite people to join us. And during the course of the week that WTKA gives out passes, you can actually get inside the gate itself. But if you don't, you can still sit on the fringes and still hear things very well because the speakers will be available. But one of the reasons why I'm really pumped is we are going now to be on W4 Country as a simulcast on the FM. And for those of you that have never listened to AM radio before and never had an attention to, then you're going to be able to hear something that's been going on for, I guess we're getting close to 18 years on the air doing this pregame show.
Wow.
But it will now be on FM, and I'm excited the fact that there's going to be absolutely new people listening to this program, which I think is fantastic, but I'm biased. We're going to do 3 hours, and it starts 4 hours to kick off to 1 hour to kick off before we join the network. Sam Webb is there, Ira Weintraub, and W4's new morning show host is going to be the fourth member of our team.
The Goose.
The Goose. He will be there, so there will be 4 people on the set doing the broadcast now. And I know Goose is a big Michigan football fan. He's got 2 tattoos on his forearms, one with the block end and one with the other Wolverine logo.
The Wolver Bear, as we call it at Invictors. Yeah, you guys know what about.
So he's going to certainly bring the personality of the fan involved. I'm curious how that's all going to mesh out. I'm sure it's going to be great. He's a broadcast professional. And we're going to be doing what we normally do. And,
I love it.
And we're just going to have a 4th person involved. But really excited about the fact that W4 Country will be airing these. And I think it's just going to increase our audience and increase our listenership big time.
Okay, cool. And I want to talk about your kind of in-game experience because we're both in the press box. But lest we forget, Steve, the post-game show is going to be at one of our favorite places in Saline, right down the street at Oscar's Sports Bar and Pub. It's a family-run place that Steve and I like to hang out with. It's actually where we kind of conceived the Professor and the Pundit show and talked about it.
We sometimes hang out there for 3 hours straight. Welcome new people who come in. They sit, they eat, they leave. We're still sitting there. Other people come in, they sit, they eat, they leave. We're still talking.
Well, the idea was, why don't we bring some of the conversations we have to the airways? But we do that at Oscars, and my understanding is that Ira and WTKA will do the post-game show. So about, an hour after the game?
Yeah, it's usually about an hour because the network takes post-game interviews, thoughts, scoreboards, more thoughts, etc.
So, I'll throw it out there. So Steve and I are regulars there usually after the game, and especially when they're doing the post-game show. If you are in the Ann Arbor, Saline area, I encourage you to stop by Oscar's. Try it, by the way. Their food is awesome. You can meet Oscar. He's a wonderful dude. Come by and say hi.
So that is off State and Michigan Avenue.
Yeah.
It's in front of the Walmart area. So there's a strip mall.
Yes.
In front of Walmart. And that's where they're located at.
Yeah, don't be turned off by the strip mall either. You walk in there and it's a classic sports bar with a separate bar section, great bartenders and staff.
A lot of memorabilia.
Yeah.
On the walls.
They've got some good stuff. They got some vintage stuff, Steve, and I've nitpicked Oscar on it. They have a picture from 1927 Ohio State game, and the little plaque on it says says the first game at Michigan Stadium, which it is not.
No.
That was the dedication game, but it was not the first game. But
he's got to go to one of those bowling trophy places to get a new nameplate.
Yeah, right.
I'm not a bowler, but I would like you to make a nameplate for me.
Right. The guy who etches the name in the Stanley Cup, maybe we can get him to, fix that thing. So, no, but it'd be fun. But we are both in the press box and we've already been, I assumed you've been approved, Steve, through your WTKA channels, and I've been approved, and I'll be back up there this year. And I was trying to think of when my first time in the press box was, and it was actually in the old press box in 2009. So that was Rich Rod era when I got a game day credential for the first time to an actual game. And I remember it fondly. Again, and it was I'm glad because I got to experience that. The press box has been done and redone a few times since 1927. but I got to experience what was really what most people consider the press box through that Bo era, which which was replaced and of course with the renovations in 2010. But I don't think I've ever taken it for granted that we get the access we get. It's obviously nice when the weather isn't cooperating, but beyond that, the fact is we've got friends up there. We've got people we talk to. You get lots of the local dignitaries and the broadcast crew. You see them come in and out. The assistant coaches cut through there to get to their little rooms where they work. It's a different kind of game day vibe that you get. And they have TVs with other games sometimes and things like that, and you can see replays a little better. But it's a cool experience for me. Do you have any early memories of being in the press box?
1995, I think, was the first time.
Wow.
I was there as a TKA person. Somebody else invited me up to the photo deck to take video in the early 90s. First time for TKA was in 95. That was very sporadic. 2001, the Ohio State game that changed everything. Tressel's first game. I was in auxiliary seating, and they literally put me in between, not next to, but put me in between two Buckeye greats, Earl Bruce and Keith Byers.
No kidding.
I sat in between them, and it's not like they asked me to move, and if they did, I refused. I wanted to hear them talk to one another with me as a channel in the middle. I wanted to be the operator to hear all of that. And even though they won the game and they were very excited about it, it was sort of a semi-honor, if you want to call it that I was actually sitting between those two guys in particular. Two stalwart names of the rivalry from the 80s.
Time.
So I was there for that. But my biggest memories probably have to do with actually being set up to work for another company. And that would be the Big Ten Network, or one time I did a Michigan-Notre Dame game, the Tate Forcier game where they won late. I was working in the Notre Dame broadcast booth.
What were you doing? Like spotting?
I was
Okay.
spotting or doing stats.
Well, tell people what spotting means. That's probably
basically to assist the play-by-play and color broadcasters. They have these flip charts where the 2 deep or even the 3 deep is out, and their numbers and their names and little bits of information. It's a trick of the trade for broadcasters.
Yeah.
So all this information is sort of sitting out there in front of them. And a spotter would actually stand, and this is usually what I did, I would stand in between them, and it's a fight for elbow room. I mean, it's like being at a crowded bar on a Friday night with a bunch of smoke. It's kind of like being like that. And you go in there and you see who carries the ball, who caught the ball, who made the tackle, and you go to their flip chart and you stick your pencil down on the spot of the box that has that particular player who caught the pass or who made the tackle.
It seems like a lot of pressure, Steve. I got to admit.
There is.
Because I'm not good at that.
Spotting is much more difficult to me than doing stats because numbers come to me very, very quickly, adding, subtracting, things like that. Somebody punts at the 33-yard line. It goes to the 16. It's 34 and 17. It's a 51-yard punt.
Okay, see, I don't want to do that either.
See, that is easy, okay? But because Michigan is so high up, and it was with the new press box, that it requires binoculars. And I'm not great with binoculars, and I got to flip them down, and my eyes have to readjust. And when you have the binoculars and the two little circles that go in front of the eyes, I easily miss things.
Yeah.
You know, you're narrowly scoped on the field. I just like putting the binoculars down and just seeing it. And back in the day, my eyesight was really, really good. If I were to spot today, I think I would use the binoculars, and I think I would suck at it. But
yeah.
Anyway, the point.
Plus, with all the jersey numbers, and I know that they're organized by position, but it's like, oh my god.
Yeah. Anyway, the point is the Notre Dame broadcast. I'm working in, I think it was Westwood 1, so it's a national feed. They had Don Crickey, I think, was the Notre Dame play-by-play broadcaster, and I think Alan Pinkett, who used to run for Notre Dame in the mid-'80s. He was the color commentator, and I would stand in between the two of them and point. And, of course, it's a Notre Dame broadcast, so whenever Notre Dame did something, they were very, very happy about it. When Michigan did something, I had to be stone cold, like nothing. And so the game went down in the end, and Tate Forcier won the game with the scramble, and they were just completely dejected, and I was just trying to do my best.
Was it Greg Matthews that he hit?
Yeah, there was that.
Okay.
Yeah, and there was also the run play. It was a 4th down at a cover 0, and so Tate broke the line, and he went in for a score, and then Weiss didn't use his timeouts appropriately enough. he was getting ridiculed for that. And, they were just all so dejected. And I just had to go, yep, tough break, guys. That kind of thing. And just say absolutely nothing. And then there were a few times where I got to do work for the Big Ten Network on TV, doing sort of the same thing. I kind of like the stats better, and I learned how people did stats, by being a spotter. I watched how professionals from ESPN and ABC and the Big Ten Network did their stuff. I was absolutely fascinated by the cohesion, do their own individual sign language, and the TV wide shots. They show like Herb Street and Fowler broadcasting the game. Well, the other 6 guys that are shoulder to shoulder rubbing against all these, they all depart. Like they're not even there,
all
right?
People supporting them and helping them.
Yeah, they all disappear. Yeah. It gives you the illusion that it's only just the 2 of them and the camera guy inside there, and that's just not the case at all. One last thing. TV is where the money's at, by the way. I got paid to put on a headset and push a button and tell people in the truck what down and distance it was.
The whole game?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's responsible by a person who's typing things out inside a truck outside the stadium. That message about what down and distance was had to be relayed by somebody from the stadium to the person typing.
Okay.
That was me.
Okay.
For one game.
I assume they have technology now to handle this problem.
I don't know because they did back then, and they didn't do it that way.
Again, a little bit of pressure, but not as much.
Well, there's no pressure on that at all. But
you're just looking at the scoreboard.
You're looking at the scoreboard.
Okay.
Wait for it to flip.
Okay.
And then you would push a button and go 3rd and 6. Release the button. And make sure you're succinct and say it clearly because you don't want a bunch of crosstalk traffic. Because there's a lot of crosstalk traffic, but it's for important things, right? You don't want to hear somebody say, "Can you repeat that down and distance again?" Because the director would probably go nuts.
So all temptation of 3rd and 6, and Michigan really needs to stop here. You can't. No, you just do your job. I don't like the way this game is going. Got to go.
When they do the TV thing on ESPN, you had one job. This literally defines it.
You had one job.
You have one. Don't make more of it than what it is. Say 1st and 10. I didn't even have to say what yard line it was. It was just 2nd and 5.
That's pretty good.
That was the easiest job ever.
Well, speaking of, can I hit this, Steve? Speaking of down and distance and all that, the new scoreboard should be ready for Saturday. They're not quite done yet, though. As of this weekend, they were still finishing the new scoreboards in Michigan Stadium. How much did they cost? $60 million, something like
that? A ton.
Yeah. So you'll have your down and distance in grand fashion. Also, hopefully better replays, better production. And they installed new LED lights that I don't think we'll see on Saturday. We might see next Saturday for the 3:30 game. We will definitely see for the 3rd game those new LED lights and what they can do. So as far as what I want to see, I'm looking forward to seeing the new scoreboards, see what they do with them. We don't know that yet. Are they going to put ads on them?
Is it going to look like the Beyonce halftime concert at the Penn State night game?
Is it going to look like the Beyonce? It's a great question. So we'll see what they do with that.
That means it's halftime on The Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clarke, and we're now joined by Peak Wealth Management's president and founder, Nick Hopwood, certified financial planner. So many families are on board with Peak Wealth Management. I asked Nick, though, if you have to be a resident of Ann Arbor to become a client.
Good question. The answer is no. We have clients all over the country, even out of the country, in Europe as well. But a lot of our guys graduate from Michigan. They head out of town, whether it's Florida, New York, California, Carolina, Texas. We have clients in many different states. And, the technology is great. I used to tell people 10 years ago, email and phone calls and faxes get the job done. But now we're leaning heavy on Zoom for those clients.
And I got to meet some of your clients. I spoke for Nick at a customer event at your office, so I assume those were somewhat local people around the football season, though, and that was a ton of fun, man.
It was, and we had one client come all the way from Chicago to hear Duels talk that night.
They should. I do draw. I do put butts in the seats with my history speeches, so yeah, that's cool. And by the way, you talked about there were multi-generations, I believe, if I recall correctly, of clients there, and Michigan fans, by the way, that really experienced that. And you talked a little bit about them and got to meet them. It was really cool.
Yeah, we had our retirees, we had our guys that are thinking about retirement, and our young accumulators.
And Nick, if people want to know more, how can they get a hold of you?
You can schedule an appointment with us at peakwm.com or give us a call at 734-681-7575.
One more time with that phone number?
734-681-7575.
If we're previewing what's going to go on, there are some new changes, Steve. A couple new rule changes. Do we want to get into that a little bit?
Yeah.
So I've heard a lot about this notion that they're not going to stop the clock when you get a first down now. A rushing first down or any first down will not stop the clock. They'll continue to run it, which is more NFL style, I believe, until, the last couple of minutes of the game?
It's the last 5 minutes of the second quarter and the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter.
Okay. So, in other words, the actual game time should be compressed in theory a bit and will be. And we got to see it a little bit this past weekend in week 0, as they call it, with Notre Dame played and USC played and a few other teams. And what was your read on the reaction from fans?
The read on the reaction that I'm seeing from Facebook and Twitter, and I'm sorry I'm not on any more social media programs, is they're not liking it. And I'm not surprised. It's probably not going to be as bad as you think. If you're used to seeing 40 minutes of real time per quarter and 12 minutes of commercial breaks inside that, well, now it's going to be like 35 minutes per quarter, but still going to be the same 12 minutes of advertising, meaning the ratio of the game time to commercial time is getting more even. And one of the things that I noticed watching the college football game on Saturday to the NFL is just like you're blanketed in commercials in the NFL.
You know, that's true. Yeah.
And so I know the formats. Both the NFL and college football take 4 TV timeouts per quarter. In the NFL, they have the additional 5th TV timeout for the 2-minute warning. The college football length of breaks, especially on Fox, is longer than it is on other networks. You already hear the people in the stands complain about how long the Fox timeouts are, and they put it on the scoreboard, the length remaining in the timeout, so people can actually see how much they have to endure.
Yeah.
Because being in the stands, I remember it's like, well, it should be starting by now. Why isn't it starting now? Gosh darn it, should be starting by now. But now they put a clock so that you could actually see how much time is left on the scoreboard. I don't know if they're going to do that.
You've had some booze rain down when in the formula and the timing is like you just had one and you're doing another one. You're killing me.
So it's 4 timeouts. And they have to err on the side of caution early on in the quarter
to make sure they get them in.
So what happens is Michigan goes on one of those patented time-consuming drives. It takes 8 minutes. They haven't taken their first of the 4 TV timeouts left, and there's 7 minutes left in the quarter. Well, they still got to get 4 of them in the next 7 minutes. So what they'll do is Michigan scores to kick the extra point. Let's take the 3-minute timeout. Then there will be kickoff, and we're going to take another timeout so we can get our second one of the 4 in.
Your point is that the commercials aren't going to stop and they're not going to change their length and they don't have a new rule, but they got to get them in. That's what's paying for all these giant TV contracts.
Right. That the Big Ten is enjoying and, the Pac-12 hates right now.
Okay. I wonder, a team like Air Force, which is their offense is designed to get 3.4 yards a rush and get a first down. That's all they do. You talk about that 8-minute drive. I wonder who's done the math, but it'll shorten the game.
In real play, how does this affect the actual team besides your personal viewing watch? Is that teams that are coming in with an upset, if they start off strong, they have less time to have to hold on to that. Because we've seen a lot of college football games, Greg, where some upstart, it can even be a conference game upstart, surprises you. They have a 2-score lead, but don't worry about it. Our team's got plenty of time to catch up. You don't have as much time to catch up. You might have 1 or 2 less possessions because of that. And sometimes, like a Michigan ground game doesn't wear people out until the fourth quarter. They may not get that luxury to wear people out because the game is going to be shorter. Is it a whole quarter shorter? Absolutely not. In fact, if you're a student of the game and been around and as old as we are, they used to stop the clock after first downs and wouldn't start it again until after the snap. Now, a decade ago, they stopped that, and as soon as the ball was set and ready to play, they would restart it. And the officials are getting even faster about getting the ball set, because back in the day, they used to wait for the chains to move. They don't wait for the chain guys to get set anymore. The referees get the ball, and they put it down on the hash mark, wherever it's supposed to be, and they signal go. It's maybe only 7 or 8 seconds that you're losing per first down, but there's also 30 first downs per game.
Yeah, I think the key stat will be comparing number of plays in the game versus the last few years. And we don't have enough sample size, I assume, right now, but we will after week 1.
Notre Dame game Navy was, I think, 3 hours and 10 minutes. The average football game last year was 3:21.
Okay.
which has expanded. And there's no doubt about it. The college football game has gotten longer. They used to be 3 hours long. Now they're getting to be about 3.5. And some of the bigger games are getting to be about 3:40. The national championship game and the playoff games, they might as well be 4 hours.
Right. Well, I think the schedule was there's a new game and a 3:30. And the previous game was supposed to be over with time to set up the next game.
Right.
Right. So we'll see. That's not the only change. What else, Steve? What is there anything else significant? I know you can't call back-to-back timeouts to ice the kicker anymore.
That's
you can
nice.
Call one.
That's nice because that could take an eternity. You just want to get the game over with, kick the ball, and you don't want to see 3 consecutive timeouts called to ice the kicker. I mean, if you're a fan of the marching band, you might like the fact that players aren't necessarily allowed on the field again until like 3 minutes left to go in halftime, because sometimes the kickers almost want to come out and start kicking field goals in the middle of the tuba section. While they're trying to do their performance. The major 2 rules is about not using consecutive timeouts and the clock stoppage rule, which is, again, going to make the game shorter, but it's going to be more NFL-like. But the whole college football game is becoming more NFL-like.
Well, the whole vibe is, So if Commissioner Dooley had one day, I would shorten the replay review to 60 seconds. And if you haven't made a clear decision, it's the play stands.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 45 seconds, 60 seconds. You get a minute.
I have seen sometimes where there's a replay that shows up that becomes definitive after 60 seconds that was never shown to the public in the first 60. That would create controversy. What I would like them to do is actually re-clarify their stance on replay, because there is something that I've noticed that's changed, but they won't admit to it. And under today's rules, JT Barrett would have been called short of the first down, and Michigan would have won the game. But what they're doing now is, we've always known clear, definitive visual evidence. What they're now doing is they're extrapolating from multiple different cameras to show, hey, if camera A shows this, and even though it's not definitive, and camera B shows this, and even though it's not definitive, you could take the 2 A and B cameras and make a not only reasonable, but almost foolproof positive that therefore C happened. That's what they're doing now.
So the Aiden Hutchinson sack against Michigan State and the sack fumble and 6. So you are listening to 2 people who think there's a reasonable suggestion that, yes, he was down. Like, you're going to talk to the only Michigan fans who looked at all that and go, okay, maybe he was down, right? You were one of those people, Steve. Yeah, like, you could see how they thought his shin was down. And my point to that is just never should have got that far. When you're looking at blades of grass in 3 different angles to determine whether someone's foot was down, it shouldn't have got that far. I'm not saying it wasn't, but I'm saying the lengthy review and all the angles. So you're mashing together, the laws of physics must apply here, and you're extracting this. Is exactly. No, it should be clear, crisp evidence. The ball's out. It's a fumble. Or it's not. It's a touchdown. It's not. Unless we get better technology. The one place that I think replay works really well is in tennis. You have a limited number of suggestions.
Women's World Cup probably is not one of those at the moment, but yes,
I'm not crazy about that either.
No, but I mean that was just like tennis. I mean, it was by a blade of grass, and they said, yeah, it's a goal.
Okay. I wouldn't apply it there, but they're also doing like blades of grass and who's offsides in soccer. I think it's ridiculous. But anyway, I would change it. It drives me nuts. In the spirit of keeping the pace of the game moving, that is a change that they could make to increase the pace of the game.
It would.
The duration.
They say it doesn't take a lot of time, but I tell you, it seems like it takes a lot of time. It seems
For
like
those reviews?
It seems like there's an extra 10 minutes per game in just the review.
Well, then the other thing is you're often left confused about how they came to the decision. Often, right? And I know they make mistakes. So it's like
Mike Pereira on Fox. I swear, there was a time where about 30% of the time he says, this is what it should be called.
Yeah.
And the refs ruled against Pereira.
Happens all the time.
And I'm like, if you're the referee guy on the crew, you just got to hate doing this job, because you're going to be exposed on about a fourth of your calls. You're going to tell the broadcast crew, this is how it's going to go and this is why. And then they go the other way.
Know,
and then you go and sit down and feel like an idiot until the next time you're called up.
It's not like he's just a dude off the street. He was wasn't he like head of officials or something? So
he has the credentials.
Like they're exposing the problem.
Exactly.
Okay. Anyway.
He has the credentials.
Anyway.
Gene Steratore was doing it for basketball, and it was sort of the same thing.
What's funny is I think most people disagree with me on because they want it right and they don't want Michigan to get screwed.
Yeah,
But
because Michigan's had a
guess what?
history of being screwed.
You're going to get screwed. So I hate it. Or get rid of it.
It is a kind of a funny thing with officiating because sometimes I will just look on a casual play. It's 1st and 10. And there's a play that swings out for 9 yards, and you can tell that the guy was well short of the marker. You don't need replay.
Yeah.
They just go ahead. You got it. 1st down. Let's move the chains.
Yeah.
And it's like, this really kind of surprises me. At the same time, I get incensed when it's 1st and 10, and he made it 9 yards, and he's on his own 30-yard line. Hey, let's review to make sure it's 2nd and 1 or 1st and 10. I'm like, no, we do not need to review this. Let's review a touchdown. Let's review an interception. Let's review a fumble. I don't think we need to review where the consequences are 2nd and inches as opposed to 1st and 10 on your side of the field.
No.
I don't think we need to waste our time over that. But at the same time, I do find it funny sometimes when a guy is like clearly a half a yard short and they just go, yep, extended arm, move the chains.
It does. It does. Oh,
Does that make me a hypocrite?
I don't know. So, actual game, Steve.
Yeah.
If I am a casual fan and I find Peacock after driving all over town and in Tacoma, Washington, and someone's got the feed, what am I looking for on the East Carolina team? Is there a player? Is there somebody who's bigger than East Carolina on that roster? Is there someone? Do they have a defensive end that, gosh, may be able to get in the backfield? Do they have some talented player we should be looking for? Now?
So their quarterback, Holton Ahlers, household name. He's thrown for nearly 14,000 yards, 97 touchdowns in his career. He's fighting for a roster spot on the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, I was going to say 14,000 and he's still playing. That's a lot.
No, he's not. He's out. Running back Keaton Mitchell last year rushed for 1,450 yards, 14 touchdowns. Now, those numbers would put you a spot behind Blake Corum if he was playing the Big Ten. Yeah, Mitchell's gone too. He's trying to make the Ravens roster. ECU last year had 2 receivers with over 1,000 yards each last year. You can add their names to the list of 2 that are not going to be playing in this game. The offensive line returns 1 full-time starter. He didn't practice in the spring.
Oh, jeez.
That's their offense.
Oh, jeez.
The defense do return 6 starters. They're a good, strong run defense. Their secondary was the 3rd worst in NCAA football, Division I. They were 131st ranked, 292 yards given up per game. They lose many of those players as well. I took a look at what people were ranking, like Pro Football Focus, CBS, Athlon. Is there any ECU players ranked on the first team, offense or defense? No. Only one service had an ECU player ranked in the second team.
Okay.
So, no, I don't think you should expect anything or look for a particular player.
Punter, kicker, anything?
No.
Okay. Sometimes these guys have like this phenomenal kicker.
Okay, let me tell you what their kicking stats were last year. They were 3 of 8 from beyond 30 yards.
Okay. All right.
1 of 5 beyond 40 yards.
This is like bizarro Jake Moody.
What it means is there is no name or number to really look out for who's a star. I think the only thing that you will want to look at is I believe their starting quarterback, he's a 4th-year sophomore, is 6'4", 240, but apparently can run.
Huh. Looks like Roethlisberger.
Yeah, but can run.
Okay.
I wouldn't say run like Denard, but I'm just saying he can run a little bit. So if East Carolina scrambles for a first down, let's just not overreact and talk about how our containment defense in the front 7 is awful.
Okay. All right.
Let's just not do that.
Okay.
I think the strength is going to be their running game over their passing game. And the funny thing is, they had their best team since 2014 last year. They went 8-5. They won their bowl game by a lot. They lose all those players. They still might win 8 games next year. Why is that? Because 3 of the top teams in the American Athletic Conference went to the Big 12.
All right.
This season.
Yep.
Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF are now in the Big 12. Those were the top 3 teams in 2021. They were 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in 2022. Tulane is the defending champ. They're still around in the AAC. And the AAC added 6 new teams from Conference USA. So despite all of this, ECU still might be a player or a factor. They're 6 in the preseason media poll for that conference.
What about the other side of the ball? So, jokes aside, it looks like we're setting up really good. against this team, right? But I heard, there's still some questions about who's going to start left tackle, which is obviously an important question at Michigan. I don't know if that's been settled, Steve. And then I'm kind of looking at, I don't know how much we're going to throw the ball, but I assume we're going to throw the ball a little bit. I saw Roman Wilson is going to wear the number 1 jersey, the coveted Michigan number 1 jersey this year. I want to see how our receivers do. I'm not really worried about our defense. I think they're going to make some big plays out there Saturday. They're going to force ECU into bad situations. What are you looking for? Realistically, are you looking for anything out of this team?
In week 1, you really can't make a measurement or tell a story about what this Michigan defense is going to be, whether it's so super positive or whether there's concerns to make out anything in week 1. But I do want to look to see who's going to make up for the plays that Mike Morris was making, the way Mozzie Smith was run stuffing the center of that line. We're being told there are guys who are going to be doing that, and that's fantastic. I would like to see that on the field. I would like to see the receiving game, I think, is a big question mark on the offense. Will these receivers create separation? Will they be able to make plays in space? If the running game is getting bogged down for whatever reason, and I wouldn't expect it would be in many situations, I want to be able to see if we can stretch the field vertically. Can Roman Wilson do that? Can Cornelius Johnson do that? Can any of the sophomores do that? Can any of the true freshmen? We're not going to get those answers until Michigan plays Rutgers, and more people would say that won't even come down to Rutgers. You'll find more about this Michigan team when they go on the road and play Minnesota and Nebraska.
So who do you think is coming in, assuming JJ plays a couple quarters maybe? Who's going to come in for JJ? Assuming
I think Jack Tuttle's the number 2 guy right now.
Okay.
I think Tuttle was the starting quarterback in Indiana, for a couple of years. So I would assume that he would be the number 2. And if he isn't, then that just tells you how great Warren has ascended. And then Alex Orji is another guy they're trying to find space for on the field. You may have heard that he could be returning.
Plan.
Yeah, secret plan, and let me reveal it. It's like the evil character in James Bond.
So for context, somebody asked Harbaugh, or he's talking about the quarterbacks, and he mentioned Alex Orji, and he goes, and we have a secret plan. And then you hear a hush over the press, and then he explains the plan, which is to get him in on special teams and or kick returning or something, right? I mean, I am curious to see how that second quarterback does, assuming we'll see him. You mentioned we should have guys replacing Mozzie Smiths on defense, and one of those guys is Chris Jenkins, and we've seen all this hype video. We've seen workouts with Ben Herbert, right, where he did a Turkish deadlift of 175 pounds with a straight arm above his head, where you get up and sit down in a certain form. It's remarkable. And he's supposed to be just throwing people around. And he's captain. He's a captain this year.
And his grip strength on the Big Ten Network was far superior.
That's great.
225 or whatever it was that he did. But, yeah, Greg, it's coming up. The podcast drops on Wednesday, so that means there's 4 days remaining until Michigan football. And remind everybody again that the Professor and the Pundit will be doing a 2-hour stint between 12 and 2 p.m. on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, part of Fantastic Friday. So again, 12 to 2 p.m. Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, MichiganInsider.com. Postgame is going to be at Oscars and Celine. We're going to be at Joe's Garage, both doing our segments this week in Michigan football history.
Oh, this week in Michigan football history. Yeah, so I pre-record a short couple-minute segment for the pregame show, which is squeezed in. When is it? Do you know when that goes, Steve?
It's in the beginning of the third hour.
Beginning of the coveted third hour is my segment, and you can get that at invictors.com. I think we talked about the Florida game in Jerry World this week, because that fell on September 2nd. Yeah, we won this one.
Okay.
We tend to do Florida. Good games, people. We don't do too many sad games. So
hey, before we wrap up, you knew something about the captains that you couldn't tell everybody on the podcast.
So I did have insight, for what it's worth, that not only Blake and Mike Sanistro were going to be captains, but that there were going to be 6 captains and that they were going to be all seniors, which I think is something they've done the last couple of years. But I had insight to that through being around the program and being around the team, but I couldn't say anything. So I knew that was going to happen. And I also anticipated that people from other fan bases would knock JJ for not being a captain, because Connor Cook, famously from Michigan State, got a lot of crap when he was a senior, not being named captain, and that people extrapolated that to his character. I don't want to get into that. But, whether that was right or wrong, there's some evidence that suggests maybe it was. But that is not the reason. So JJ was not eligible to be captain, lest any of your Ohio or Michigan State friends are questioning JJ's character. I assure you, had he been eligible, JJ would be a captain the way he is thought of by his teammates.
So coming up next week, we'll actually talk about a game that actually happened.
Will we,
Carolina.
though? Will we ever get to it, Steve? I think it's what people are wondering.
And then we'll be previewing the next opponent, which I believe is UNLV, and then we will be hitting on college football topics locally and nationally across the way in between. Each and every single week here on The Professor and the Pundit. A reminder to please follow, rate, and share with your friends. The numbers have continued to ascend. We're excited about what the numbers can get to during the course of this 2023 season, which could be an historic year for University of Michigan football. So again, thank you for joining us again here on The Professor and the Pundit.
And thank you, Nick Hopwood, once again for supporting us in this effort. Again, if you are looking, or you know someone, or you have a family member who's looking to invest some money and needs advice, wants to retire with confidence, make sure you hit up Nick, our good buddy.
It's peakwm.com or it's 734-681-7575. That's 681-7575 or peakwm.com.
Steve, it's been awesome. I'll see you back in the studio for Fantastic Friday.
That's right. Back-to-back Big Ten champions. Go Blue, Greg.
Go Blue.